What you're about to see is insane! This is Hydromeda, my giant tropical wetlands vivarium, home to a ton of aquatic creatures, as well as life on the land. It's a biodiverse and intricate terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem within glass. But as with all aquatic systems, I've been keeping an eye on a specific group of life that has slowly been growing in power on a quest to conquer the waters. Algae, every aquarium owner's nightmare. And although Hydromeda already had a group of creatures I've selected whose whole purpose was to eat algae, it seems my chosen algae eaters weren't enough. The algae was starting to grow in like crazy in some places. And so, it was time for Operation Plan B. A second team of algae killers, whose release I was saving as an emergency Plan B in case the first team of algae eaters weren't enough for the job, were now waiting in their bags for their release. I really hoped they would help me deal with the increasing algae crisis. But once the bags were opened, I discovered an entirely different crisis would emerge, and a biological anomaly would be taking place that completely blew my mind. Welcome to my Ecosystem Vivarium Series, where Mother Nature and chaos come together to produce the craziest of events. Here on the AntsCanada Ant Channel. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. The bags of Team Plan B were undergoing their temperature acclimation period, and the creatures within were waiting to be released. With the Wheel of GAIA landing on new aquatic species last week, this was my chance to deal with Hydromeda's ongoing algae problem that I was kind of putting off all this time, hoping that the ecosystem would just deal with it naturally. I recently added a new team of tadpoles, which are known algae eaters, but it seems they still weren't enough. Now I thought this would be a simple operation. Release the new critters and they would get straight to work, eating the algae, right? Well, that's not quite how things happened, as another crisis would emerge the moment I unleashed the new critters into Hydromeda. And strangely, it would involve the new tadpoles. The amber morning light streamed in, bringing warmth and light energy straight from the sun that beamed gloriously through the windows of my ant room and sprawled across the eastern floor of Hydromeda. It's always so beautiful in the mornings, watching Hydromeda bathing in the first moments of sunlight. The fish dance and glisten as they pass through the light, as a ton of energy is delivered into the tank, enjoyed by all the plant life that had waited all night to absorb it. The light eventually makes its way to the furthest end of the tank, delivering its rays to every creature and plant in the wetlands. I attribute all this successful plant growth to this 2-hour-long exposure to morning sun. I mean, have a look at that red tiger lotus. So healthy. This will soon send its leaves up to the surface and hopefully produce lotus flowers. But this daily morning event of sunlight energy delivery has its repercussions. It's actually suggested that aquarium owners do not allow their planted tanks to receive any direct sunlight for reasons which I'll get into in a sec. But in our case, Hydromeda actually needs it because the artificial lights aren't powerful enough and are way too high up for the plants at the bottom to get the light they need. But the reason all this extra sunlight is not good is because some other photosynthetic life forms are able to steal it and put it into action much more efficiently than the plants. Algae are super absorbers of sunlight and have been reveling in this daily provision of sunlight energy in the tank. In addition to this, the amount of nitrogen waste, known in the aquarium hobby as bioload, that is generated by all the animals pooping and peeing in the water, and that includes all the fish and the frogs that live in Hydromeda, plus the insects that fall in, drown, and decay in the water, is very high. And though the nitrogen actually feeds all the plants, it also feeds the algae. And look at the various colonies of algae. Brown diatom algae, the brownish-greenish feathery-looking algae growing mostly along the floor. The Skittles, the resident colony of cherry shrimp, have all been doing a fairly good job at keeping diatom algae under control. We also have black beard algae, which grows in a few places, including on that snail horn. The problem with this type of algae is nothing really eats it, except one of the plant beak creatures whom we're about to meet in a sec. Then we have green spot algae, which is seen here growing on the glass, hard to scrape off, but it's the favorite food of the snails, and of the other plant bee species coming up. And finally, the most abundant and successful algae of all, green hair algae, which is growing everywhere. Here it's completely dominating the moss. This green hair algae is probably the most problematic in Hydromeda, as it directly competes with the aquatic plants it grows on for bioload nutrients, as well as stealing sunlight energy. This moss patch is stressing right now, fighting for its life against the green hair algae that is choking it. If I let this continue, this moss hill will be all algae, and moss completely dead, and the algae will only spread outward from here onto other moss patches on its quest to completely colonize every inch and corner of our wetlands. It's also begun to increase its grip on some of the other successful plants of Hydromeda. And so, as you can see, we needed an intervention now before it was too late. Let's meet our Plan B creatures and set them loose. The tadpoles actually seemed uber curious about them. First, in this bag, are a mano shrimp, who in my opinion are the best algae eaters in the aquarium hobby. But the reason I didn't add them in when I first populated these waters is because they can't breed in Hydromeda. You see, they need brackish water to breed, meaning partly salt, partly freshwater. In the wild, adult mano shrimp who live in freshwater areas release their babies, and currents carry their babies downstream to brackish estuaries, like the areas where a river meets the ocean. And it's in these areas the babies develop. Hydromeda, of course, is completely freshwater, so they weren't a good choice over the Skittles, who can breed like crazy in freshwater. A mano shrimp were definitely my Plan B species from the start. Another downside to a mano shrimp is that the adults are huge and can bully or even eat the smaller cherry shrimp when forced together in a single area. So this is something I needed to monitor after releasing them. I'll show you what's in the other bag soon, as we can't really see them right now due to the double bagging. But first, let's release these shrimp, shall we? The first brave amanos leaped from their bag and dove towards the ground. Some remained in the bag. These two amano shrimp charged forward like juggernauts as Skittles made way for them. These juveniles were as big as the adult Skittles, but so far didn't seem to want to fight. Other Amanos were already finding items to munch on, like this piece of who knows what that is, decaying wood. This larger Amano charged forward, wanting to check out the other side of the tank. Out of my way! Out of my way! These Amanos weren't going to ask politely for the Skittles to move. Little by little, more and more of the Amanos took the leap of faith into their new home. The sight of fish swimming around was a bit nerve-wracking for the remaining shrimp. The shrimp continued to search for food in the sand. But what I really wanted to see was them eating algae, specifically the green hair algae, growing everywhere. That was what they're for. The Amano shrimp seemed super intelligent and appeared genuinely curious about some of the other tank mates. I allowed the rest to emerge on their own time, but watching the Amanos that did enter, I saw no apparent aggression so far, which was good. Both species of shrimp had to work together towards the same goal, to help deal with the algae. I couldn't wait to see if our plan B would work. And now it was time for the other bag. Wait till you guys see them. You'll love them. I opened the double bag and unleashed the creatures, not knowing what I was about to discover. Guys, these are autocats, also known as autosynclus catfish. These are also some of my favorite algae eaters for tanks. But wait a minute. Something is quite wrong. Their skin is not supposed to look like that. As I examined the catfish carefully, I noticed wisps of white tissue flaking off them. It reminded me of ick, also known as white spot disease, a well-known and nasty parasite that attaches to fish's fins, body, and gills. But this wasn't ick. Whatever it was, it didn't look good. What is that? Now these fish came from a new fish supplier I decided to go with, who assured me his stock was healthy. But clearly I was duped. These poor autocats. I surveyed the school, and although a few of them looked okay, most of them were quite in terrible shape. I also noticed that a few members had already died and were being eaten now by Hydromeda's cleanup crew. From the looks of things, these remaining autocats seemed pretty close to death. I didn't know what to do. It was then that the most unlikely Hydromedan creature stepped up to help. Like an angel descending from the heavens, a tadpole came swimming up close and began to perform the craziest thing I've ever seen. It started to feed carefully on the white tissue of the autocat's skin. What on earth? In fact, I saw that this behavior was happening all over the tank. There, my friend, a tadpole comforted. You will be okay. The tadpoles shall heal you now. This was crazy. The next morning, I checked the tank and couldn't believe my eyes. The autocats were healthy. The white tissue growing from their skin had completely vanished. Wait, had the tadpoles actually performed an exfoliation spa treatment on all the autocats? I refused to believe it, but it did appear as though the tadpoles did eat up all that white gunk from the autocat's skin the night before. The fish were like brand new, so much happier now, more active, and guess what else? I knew they were healthy because they began to perform one of my favorite behaviors for this species. Check it out. The autocats began to school. I watched heart full as the autocats began to move from one end of Hydromeda to the other in a beautiful school with the tetras. I had to give it to the tadpoles. Thank you, tadpoles. It looks like our autocats will actually be okay. I watched as they began to feed happily on green spot algae along the glass and on the wood. But what about all the hair algae? I was depending on our amanos to eat it. I spotted one amano feeding on a dead autocat from the night before. This was okay, but we have other creatures to eat the carcasses. Looking around, I noticed other amanos were also picking away at the dead autocat skeletons. What about the green hair algae? It was then that I noticed this amano. It was working on a piece of moss. But soon, I realized it wasn't eating the moss. I watched in utter joy as the amano shrimp began shoveling the long green strands of algae into its mouth. You could actually see it eating and swallowing the algae through its transparent body. Yay! The amanos had begun to feed on the hair algae like it was tasty pasta. I then noticed a skittle creeping in, and the amano allowed it to feed alongside it. How awesome that they're sharing. Oh, okay, maybe not. But at least there wasn't any aggression, and there did seem to be an understanding to stay out of each other's way. Over the next week, the amanos got straight to work on the algae-filled mossy hills, eating the hair algae growing on it. It was so satisfying watching them feed. With every strand of algae eaten was relief and salvation of our moss. Even through the night, the amanos worked closely alongside the tadpoles, the autocats, the Corridoras, and the Skittles to help clean up and deal with the algae outbreak. And AC family, a week later, this is what the mossy hills looked like. Before and after. Awesome! That is a major reduction in algae. There was still a bit more on this side of the moss hill, but some algae is okay. At least I knew there would be food for the Amanos for the rest of their time living in Hydromeda. And I was amazed to see the back of these plants that used to be filled with hair algae, now completely clean. The autocats had done an awesome job at cleaning up the algae growing on all the leaves of the plants around Hydromeda. Check out how clean that grass is. And oh my precious Boosie was also free of algae. All these plants could now absorb light unobstructed. And hey, the black beard algae had been eaten off the snail. All right. I was so happy to see that the entire algae team worked together at weakening the algae colonies throughout the tank. It was clear that the algae was going to lose its grip and that our plants would continue to dominate. Now, it's important to note that the goal here isn't to completely eliminate algae from the tank, but rather to keep it controlled. You see, algae, which are actually photosynthetic protists, is still vital to ecosystems, as they're a source of food and energy for many aquatic organisms, as well as a provider of oxygen, just like plants. In aquatic environments that lack plants or aren't the most plant-friendly, it's algae that comes in to grow and fill that same ecological niche as plants, taking energy from the sun and powering the entire food chain from there. Seaweed, kelp, and phytoplankton are examples of algae. So although it looks unsightly in a tank and can turn your water green, algae isn't bad and plays an important role in nature. They're only a problem if allowed to completely take over. But from the looks of things, with this new, more robust team of algae eaters and cleaners, algae will remain controlled in Hydromeda for now. I also have a chiller to curb the growth of algae, as warmer waters can be bad for plants and great for algae growth, as well as a UV filter to help zap floating algae microbes in the water. Now, I still can't believe nor explain what happened between the tadpoles and the near-death autocats. Do any experts out there care to chime in and guess what that white tissue was that the tadpoles ate off the autocat's skin? That was truly unreal to capture on film. As I watched the various creatures of our wetlands all going about their business throughout Hydromeda, I realized that in nature, every creature, plant, and living thing had its own unique and vital purpose in the ecosystem, contributing to the balance and health of the whole. Remove any one organism and the system falls apart. No organism was more valuable than the other. Each life form, important for all other life to thrive. If there was a problem threatening the ecosystem, nature had its way to deal with it. And thankfully, the Wheel of Gaia helped send in some well-needed agents. My dream for this whole vivarium project was to create an ecosystem in a quest to understand the science of its various parts. And this week, I realized that that dream became a reality. I couldn't wait for what new discoveries lay ahead for our tropical ecosystem within glass. And so it was time to spin the Wheel of Gaia once again to see what our next ecological event was. And this is where it landed. Oh boy. Vote in my community tab to affect this story.